Okay, welcome back to this mess, whatever this mess is. Don't have an intro, probably will never have an intro, it's just gonna be awkward. Before we start, I want to mention the fact that I have a Tumblr account. That is the best way to get in contact with me about whatever. If you want to yell at me, if you want to be friends, whatever. That's the best place. So I will link it in the description. I'm also following a bunch of stuff for the new season of Druck and Scum España, because as far as I'm concerned, those are the only two remakes that are airing right now. Okay, now that I've alienated, I'm sure, some of you, let's continue on with episode 5. So I'm literally just gonna stop it right here. We've got like not even a second in, and I'm gonna stop it and talk. So this first shot directly parallels the first shot of the last episode, where Mateo wakes up and he's alone and his arm is just like draped over his pillow and there's nothing for it to hold on to. But here, he's got something to hold on to. I mentioned a couple times before how Mateo's body language is all about kind of slumping and slouching and leaning on things, and this is the first of many times that we're going to see Mateo leaning on David. He really craves like that physical affection and physical intimacy, and he definitely gets it with David. Good for him, honestly. Good for him. Hand holding, it is their thing. So tender. All of it is just so like gentle and sweet. You can already tell that they're just so comfortable with each other. They're just chilling. They don't always need to be talking. They don't always need to be kissing. They can just be. That's really nice. Alright, so this shot is iconic, obviously. This is done in pretty much every single remake. It's done in the OG. And I want to talk about the composition of it and how it is different from the OG and how it is the same. In the OG, Evan is on the bottom of the screen, Isaac is on the top, and they're both kissing to their right. Evan is wearing a navy zip-up, Isaac is wearing a gray hoodie. And there is no movement in the OG. It stays in this framing throughout the entire montage where we don't hear them speak. It just stays at this framing. Isaac and Evan move, but there is no camera movement. It's just a bunch of static downward shots. And then in Druck, Mateo is on the top of the screen, David is at the bottom, and they're both kissing to their left. David is wearing a navy zip-up, just like Evan did. Mateo is wearing the gray hoodie, just like Isaac did. And then as the lyric, "Watch the fan as it spins," plays, the camera actually moves and it starts spinning to the left. And it spins so much that it almost goes upside down.
Watch the fan as it spins, in my arms wrapped in. Don't know where you start and where I begin. Like I found myself in a magic.
And I really like that movement because along with the composition of the frame being slightly turned on its head from the OG, the movement also symbolizes how Druck has turned the Isaac and Evan dynamic on its head, which I think is super cool. So it spins on "Watch the fan as it spins, in my arms wrapped in, don't know where you start and where I begin." And if that isn't perfect on the nose symbolism of how Mateo and David both take elements of Isaac and Evan, then I don't know what is. So speaking of this song, it is our third James Blake song in the season. There were 2 of them back in episode 2, and I talked like forever about the second one because it's so good. And this is the third one. Absolutely love it. Another one of my favorites. It's actually James Blake's birthday when I'm filming this, which is kind of cool. So that doesn't matter. But it's called Mile High by James Blake, Travis Scott, and Metro Boomin. And some of the lyrics, surprise, surprise, they're perfect. "Don't want to see you by yourself. When you're alone with me, you never come up short. Watch the fan as it spins, in my arms wrapped in. Don't know where you start and where I begin. Like I found myself an imaginary friend, and when we stay in, not missing anything." Come on, it's perfect. It's perfect. These lyrics totally remind us of how well Mateo and David connect and how well they balance each other and understand each other, seemingly without even really trying. It's just a natural connection that they have. And also referencing, like, they're staying in and they're not missing anything. Like, the entire world is just going on outside of this room, but they don't give a shit. Like, they're okay right now. They have each other, and that's all they need right now. They are isolating themselves from everyone else and from all of their problems, the mess that specifically Mateo has created. They're just kind of hiding away from it, and they don't feel like they're missing anything. Every version of Isak and Evan has this deep conversation where they talk about some, like, big concepts in life. And in the original, it's parallel universes. I know in Como España they talk about trust and how it's difficult to trust people, even if you've known them for a really long time. They all set up the specific dynamic that each Isak and Evan couple has. David and Mateo, they talk about fate and they talk about loneliness. So on one hand, David doesn't believe in fate, or at least he doesn't want to, because he thinks that fate means you can't make your own decisions. You know, if everything is predetermined, then you don't have free will, and that scares him. And that makes so much sense for David's character. We as the audience know that David was outed in his last school and he had so much control taken away from him. Everyone knew that he was trans and they did horrible things with that information, and they made him feel out of control of his own life and his own story. So it makes complete sense that he would want all of that control. He wants free will. He wants to be able to make his own decisions, and even thinking about the idea of fate, thinking about everything being predetermined and you not having control of your own life, terrifies him. But then Mateo, on the other hand, seemingly doesn't really have any problem believing in fate. And he doesn't mind the idea of not making all of his own decisions, which I also think makes perfect sense for the way that Mateo has been characterized throughout the season so far. He has spent so much time being passive and letting things just happen around him and kind of going with the flow and blah, blah, blah. So I think he's just kind of used to that feeling of, yeah, just like let things happen, man. He's used to people just kind of speaking for him and going along with stuff. I really love how their viewpoints on fate really make a lot of sense for how they've been characterized. And then we get even more insight into David's flight response, which I've talked about. They both have this tendency to isolate themselves when they feel threatened. They're not very confrontational people. They both just would rather escape and run away. But at this point, they do it in different ways. David would run away, he would hide, and he would wait until it's safe again. And he would wait alone. He would do all of that alone. He wouldn't bring anyone with him. And I think it's really cute that Mateo tries to, like, maybe get David to be like, oh yeah, maybe I would bring you, even as a joke, but David does not budge. Like, he's serious. He would wait alone. Even though there is this connection between them, David still isn't ready to say, like, oh, if I was really, really having a traumatic experience, yeah, I'd take you with me. He would still rather be alone. And Mateo would also run away, because we've seen him run away many times. We know that that is also his instinct. But he hates the idea of being alone. Mm-hmm. He's surprised that David would want to be alone. He's like, you would really be alone? Like, really? And David has to ask him, like, yeah, what's wrong with that? Like, why would I bring anyone with me? And Mateo kind of matter-of-factly is like, so you wouldn't be alone and miserable? The way that he says that and the fact that he's opening up about hating being alone right now makes it so awful to think back to every single time Mateo has looked or felt alone throughout the season so far, which has been so many times. Too many times for me to count, truly. He just wants to spend time with someone and to not feel so alone all the time because he hates it. And we finally get that solid confirmation here. And this also aligns Mateo a bit more with Evan, because in the original, Evan talks about how we're all alone in the end anyway. You know, it's just us and our thoughts forever. The only way to escape them is to die. You really get the sense that Evan does not love that idea of being alone, because then he's just with his thoughts ruminating. Even though I wish Mateo would have expanded more on why he doesn't like being alone, instead of just saying like, yeah, that's all he says. So even though I wish they would have done that, I think Druck was careful to not have him do that, because then that would have aligned him a bit too much with Evan, maybe. I do think that if they had had him say anything more, then it would have called even more attention to the fact that, oh yeah, he has a mental illness, and it would have called attention to the fact that Druck isn't really going to go into it that much, or as much as they should have, I would say. They did align Mateo with Evan enough to give him a mental illness, but not enough to actually expand upon it and give him like a full storyline with it for some reason. They just never planned on bringing it to the forefront in a meaningful way, which is one of like my biggest complaints with this season. Actually, it is my biggest complaint with this season. I love it, but I really wish they had given us closure on Mateo's depression or whatever he has. I love the way he delivers all of this. I do like the fact that they intercut the play fighting with this little monologue, but I do wish we could have seen his face throughout all of it, because when he says, "My parents split up," I love the way he says it. I love the way he looks when he delivers that line. It's delicate, and there's so much behind it. You can tell there's so much weight behind it, and there's so much history there. Probably a lot of pain there. And I really love this. I think this is so interesting. I've thought a lot about how this sequence is edited and how it relates to the original, and I think I have a theory about what it means. So Mateo talks about his mom, he talks about his parents, and mentions that his mom is just not easy. He's not harsh with it. He doesn't say that his life would be better without mentally ill people, which is what Isak says in the original. Not in this scene, but a couple clips later in this same episode, which is like the main conflict. It starts the Hell Week, pretty much. It marks the beginning of Hell Week. Isak saying that. It is what makes Evan pull away. But it's definitely different here. And this is kind of where Druck and the OG really start to split. And I think the wording that Mateo uses, just saying that she's not easy, is a perfectly valid thing for a teenager to say. Like, he's what, 17? And maybe that's not the best thing or the nicest thing to say about someone who has a mental illness, but I can't blame him. I really can't. He's 17. He's probably dealing with his own issues mentally, and she's his mom, and she's kind of supposed to be taking care of him, but I'm sure it feels like he's taking care of her, and I understand why he says that. And it's still not harsh. It still has an element of forgiveness there and of empathy there that Isak does not have for his mom. There are clues throughout the season that Mateo is more forgiving of his mother than Isak is, and this is definitely one of them. This isn't even a clue. This is like, yeah, he is. He is definitely more forgiving, which I think you can take as further evidence of Mateo having his own mental illness, because he has a level of empathy, not just sympathy, but empathy, I think. In the original, this scene doesn't really have tension in it, right? It's just like a really cute cuddling scene. There's mentions of Sonia, which is a little bit tense, but there's really not tension. The tension comes later, like I said. I don't know how many clips later, maybe 2 or 3 clips later, where Isak says that shitty thing about mentally ill people. That's when the conflict arises. But in Druck, they have that little mentioning of mentally ill people in this clip, and I think they were assuming that fans of the OG would expect to see some kind of tension there, because that conversation about mentally ill people in the OG is what causes that conflict is what causes that rift between Isak and Evan. So when they're having this conversation, when Matteo is explaining what's going on with his parents and explaining that his mom is ill, they intercut play fighting between David and Matteo. And at the end of that play fighting, there is tension. Undoubtedly, there is tension. The way that David rips Matteo's arms off of his chest, there is tension there. Matteo doesn't get to see it because he's behind David, but we see it, and the camera makes sure that we see it. Fans of the original would expect tension to arise from the mental illness conversation. But the tension doesn't arise because Matteo says something shitty about mental illnesses, which makes sense because that's not what David's secret is. David doesn't have a mental illness. Tension is still there in this scene, and when Matteo is talking about mental illness, like fans of the OG would expect, but it's in the form of Matteo touching David's chest. I know that when a lot of people were watching it live, a lot of people assumed that David was trans because the actor is trans, but if you didn't know, this is such a great way of hinting to OG fans that this is the tension here. It's not the mental illness thing, because Matteo doesn't say anything bad there, but they still inject tension into this conversation through that intercut of play fighting and through David ripping Matteo's hands off of his chest. So I think that's a really cool way of setting up the true conflict between Matteo and David, the true rift that is going to be created in this episode. It starts in the very first clip. Even though this is a really happy clip and they're together and they're ignoring the rest of the world, there is still an undercurrent of things are going to start to go wrong here. It's kind of chilling, almost. I don't know. I think that sequence is so interesting. I don't think I explained it very well, but hopefully I can edit it to make some kind of sense. The way that they do this entire episode is really interesting to me. There's always like levels of happiness and bliss there, but with every moment like that, there's usually like a little undercurrent of tension. And then also to talk about the play fighting, I mentioned a lot in the last episode that Matteo and Sarah are horrible at play fighting. They cannot do it. Their bodies are asynchronous. It just feels awkward and wrong. But with David and Matteo, they are very physically playful from the beginning. It's a nice little parallel between the two couples. This transition song is also interesting. It also really subtly imbues you with a little bit of tension along with all of this bliss and all of this happiness. The song is called Catch It by Andrew Applepie and NKLS. And some of the lyrics: try to catch it with my hands so that I can take it home, hoping I can keep it when I'm there when you're gone. So I catch it with my hands, trying hard to make it stay. It melts away. I think this is a great way to show that Matteo is trying to hold on to these moments with David. Here, literally, when he's clutching the picture before he even wakes up, which is really cute. When he gets the text and when he reads all of the texts, he gets a little bit stressed, but he looks back at the picture and that makes him smile again. And he just kind of tries to forget about the mess that he's left behind. Being with David and remembering being with David kind of grounds him again. I think the song does a perfect way of portraying that feeling of just wanting to catch these moments and not let them go. But then that last lyric of it melting away brings you back to reality. So the picture. First of all, Matteo is officially second best to a literal toaster, which is hilarious. But then more importantly, David draws himself as a vampire, which connects to Only Lovers Left Alive, and it also shows us how he sees himself. He sees himself as an outsider, kind of as this monster. And even though David has pulled back here, he escaped, it's important that he left something for Matteo so that Matteo isn't scared. He makes sure that Matteo has something to reassure him that it's not over. This is reality closing in on Matteo. All of these messages that he just can't be fucked with. And like I said before, he looks back at the picture to kind of ground himself again and not think about reality. Go back to this fantasy of him and David just being alone, literally being like the only two people in the world. This is a great time to mention once again that Mateo can be happy and still be depressed. I'm not going to shut up about it because it's extremely important. Okay, but seriously, the fact that everyone is so surprised when Mateo shows any form of happiness and being in a good mood, I feel like that should tell you something about Mateo's mental health. Like, why are we all just okay with how shocked we are when Mateo smiles? You know what I mean? Why does no one think to notice when he isn't smiling so much, when he does isolate himself so much? When Mateo is once again slapped by reality, his instinct is to run away, avoid his problems for just a little bit longer. He's kind of allowed to do that because right after that, David texts him fucking coordinates for a date on Thursday, which is so David. That is so David, right? That is cinematic, that is romantic, that is fantastical. I feel like I'm going to use those three words a lot when talking about that date. A huge theme of this episode is Mateo and David creating this kind of alternate reality for themselves in which there are no problems. Everything is fine. Everything is perfect, right? And it is a fantasy because in that world, David isn't out to Mateo yet. So it can't be reality. And I think a huge part of this episode is that alternate reality bubble being burst. And there's a hint of it in the very first clip. There's a hint of it in this clip too, because Mateo is having to run away from his problems. Reality is creeping in and creeping in and creeping in with every progressing clip, and it's just going to keep culminating and getting worse until the last clip. They can't stay in their fantasy forever. So we see Jonas pick Mateo up again, which is something we haven't seen him do in a while. The last time he did that was in episode 2. He did it twice in that episode. And I talked about how that's great symbolism of how Jonas is there for Mateo, even though he's not the best at picking up on how bad it actually is. He's still there. He's still a pretty damn good best friend, I'd say. They're kind of bringing Jonas back into the story, reminding us that he is a vital person in Mateo's life. And the way they do that is by having him literally lift Mateo up off of the ground. Because he was relatively absent in the last episode, so it's a good way of putting him back into the story. I love the way this is framed. Before I talk about the actual conversation, I just want to talk about how it's framed. It's not like a super long shot. It's actually not that long at all. But it is one shot of them walking up the ramp, and they're both in the same frame the entire time. They pull around the corner, and they're still in the same frame. And I think this is really cool when you think about how it could parallel the previous episode. I thought it was really interesting how when Sarah and Mateo were walking down this ramp, they were barely in the same frame and it was really awkward. It was to show the distance between them. But here, the camera once again makes sure to keep Mateo and Jonas in the same frame, even when they pull around the corner. They're still there. Even when the angle switches and we see their backs, they're still in the same frame together. And I think this is a great way to show that even though Mateo is hiding things from Jonas, specifically in this conversation, they are still closer than Sarah and Mateo ever were. So to talk about what's actually going on in the conversation, rather than just how it's framed, when Jonas brings up how he disappeared, it kind of looks like Mateo is fighting back a bit of a smile. Like he wants to tell Jonas this amazing thing that happened and how happy he was before reality set in. That's what it looks like to me. There are a lot of micro-expressions that Michelangelo does here that I think are super interesting that I'm going to try to catch as well as I possibly can. But you should really just watch it for yourself a couple of times and just watch what Mickey does, because I think it's pretty damn cool. But then right there's another series of micro-expressions that, to me, I'm interpreting it as him looking pissed at himself. He kind of looks away from Jonas and he's like, I think, maybe not, but that's what I see it as. I think that's because he just used his mom's mental illness as an excuse, which he knows is shitty, but he did it anyway, and he's lying to Jonas, and I think it is like weighing on him, and he knows that it's wrong. Before, he was trying to fight back a smile, and now I think he's trying to kind of fight back against this guilt that he's feeling within himself. There's so much bubbling under the surface in this conversation. I love it. I feel like that's what this entire episode is, truly. It's just like simmering until it blows up in the end. I feel like every clip has at least one conversation that has something under the surface that is kind of starting to bubble up. And then when Jonas mentions that Sarah was really pissed at Matteo for leaving, we're back to Matteo once again being hit by reality, like actual reality that he cannot escape from, no matter how many times he runs away and hides from Sarah. He can't just stay in his bliss with David forever. And Jonas stepping up, letting Matteo know that he is there for him. That is so important. He is a good best friend, alright? I feel like I've been ragging on him these past couple of episodes, but he's getting there. He really is. He wants to be there. He wants to help Matteo. He has no idea what the fuck is going on, but he is ready to talk to him, which is, it's the first step. All right, and then we finally get it. It's finally over. Matteo has finally broken up with Sarah. He's taken the step. There are pros and cons to this, right? The pros is that he does it pretty quickly. I'll have to give him that. He breaks up with Sarah pretty much as soon as he realizes that he cannot run from this, as soon as he feels that guilt hit him. And, which is different from the OG, it is over. It is 100% over. There is no scene where Matteo goes back to Sarah and kisses her and makes David feel like shit. There's nothing like that. So that's good. The cons, however, he does it through a text, which even though they only dated for like a month, it was a dick move, right? You don't break up with someone over text, whether you've been dating for a month or a year. You don't do it. That's all I'm going to talk about for this part. I will see y'all on Saturday for part 2.